Story 1. The Stranger Who Tried to Steal My Son. It was June 2017, and I was on a long, exhausting road trip with my 9-year-old son, Tom, heading to West Virginia to visit family. The drive was supposed to be relaxing, but with no working AC in my car, the heat was unbearable. By the time we hit the 6-hour mark, we were both tense, grumpy, and irritable. And to make things worse, it was getting late. Around 9 p.m., still on the interstate, Tom started complaining about needing to use the bathroom. We were already in a bit of a bad mood, so his whining pushed us into a small argument. It was one of those silent ones, where neither of us really wanted to talk, but we couldn't stop exchanging angry glances. Then, out of nowhere, I spotted a blue rest area sign speeding past us. I figured it was better to pull over now than to wait for another one. So I veered off the interstate into the rest area. When we pulled in, there were no other cars, except for one big white pickup truck parked near the building. It was quiet. The rest area had a small building with just 2 bathrooms, a couple vending machines, and some benches. That was it. Tom rushed out of the car and bolted toward the bathrooms while I stayed in the car. I left the engine running because I knew he'd be back in a minute or two. I was still fuming about the argument, but I wasn't planning on saying anything. I just stared out the window, waiting for him to come back. About a minute later, I heard the back door open. I didn't think much of it at first. It was just Tom, right? But as I glanced in the rearview mirror, something felt off. I turned to check the back seat. It wasn't Tom. My heart skipped a beat. I froze. There was a tall figure sitting in the back seat, and I could barely make out their face in the dim light. My son was supposed to be in the car, not some stranger. Panic gripped me. Who was this person? I quickly glanced at the rearview mirror again, seeing the white pickup truck pulling out behind me. The truck followed me as I merged back onto the interstate, and I swear I saw the driver's headlights flashing at me. The truck was close, way too close. I stepped on the gas trying to get away, but the truck did the same. He kept flashing his lights, signaling for me to pull over. At this point, I was convinced this guy was some aggressive driver, maybe even trying to rob me or worse. But I knew if he tried anything, I was ready to floor it. I switched lanes to the right, but so did he. He kept right on my tail, and I started slowing down, hoping he'd get the hint. Finally, the pickup truck slowed down and pulled alongside me, and the driver started yelling at me. I could barely hear him over the roar of the engine, but his face. He looked off, creepy, sketchy. "Pull over!" he yelled. I hesitated for a second, then rolled down my window, still thinking it might be some crazy road rage situation. "That's not your kid." "What?" I was completely thrown off. I stared at the back seat, trying to make sense of what he was saying. It wasn't Tom sitting back there. It was someone else. I quickly whipped my head around, and sure enough, the back door was open. The stranger who had gotten in the car was now standing outside, halfway into the woods, disappearing into the darkness. My blood ran cold. I didn't even think. I jumped out of the car and ran toward the woods, but there was nothing there. No sign of him, just a dark patch of trees. The pickup truck driver was still beside me, staring at the woods. I turned back to him, breathless, and mouthed a quick thank you as my mind was racing. I didn't know if this guy was just trying to warn me or if he'd been following me for some other reason, but I wasn't taking any chances. I quickly got back in my car and crossed the grass back to the rest area, my heart pounding in my chest. The pickup truck followed me the whole way, his headlights cutting through the darkness. When I got back to the rest area, Tom was standing there outside the bathroom, looking confused. His backpack was slung over his shoulder, and he seemed like he hadn't noticed a thing. I quickly explained to him what had just happened, still in a state of shock. I turned to the pickup truck driver, who had pulled up behind me and was waiting patiently. He nodded at me, and I thanked him again. His face remained calm, but there was a seriousness about him that made me think he had seen something similar before. I could barely get a word out. My heart was still racing. "What? What happened? Who was that guy?" I asked. "I don't know," the driver said, "but you're lucky. That wasn't your son in there. You should have listened when I said something." Before I could say another word, the pickup truck driver turned around and drove off, leaving me standing there in disbelief. I was just glad that Tom was okay, but I couldn't shake the image of the person who had tried to steal him. We got back in the car, and from that point on, we didn't say much. I don't think either of us had the words. We just drove in silence for the rest of the way to my family's house. Tom didn't ask too many questions, and I didn't volunteer any answers. All I could think about was how close we had come to something horrible. That night, when I got home, I didn't sleep at all. The thought of that stranger in my car haunted me. Who was he? What did he want? And what if I hadn't noticed until it was too late? To this day, I still don't know who that man was, but I'll never forget the sound of his voice warning me. And I'll never forget the night that almost turned into something I can't even bring myself to imagine. Story 2. The woman who almost killed us on the highway. It started like any other road trip. My girlfriend and I were driving back from California, and everything was perfectly normal. We left in the morning, drove all day, and by the time night fell, we were in a hotel, ready to rest. The way back, however, turned into something I'll never forget. We left at midday, thinking it would be smooth sailing, but we didn't realize how long that 10-hour drive would feel when the sun went down. By the time we got back on the road, we were both already exhausted. The drive was long, and after a couple of food stops, we were still cruising well past midnight. Around 12:30 a.m., we got off the freeway to grab a quick bite at a Wendy's. I ate while I drove because honestly, I just wanted to get home sooner. My girlfriend didn't like it, but I was trying to make good time. After getting back on the freeway, something changed. The rain hit us hard. My girlfriend insisted I pull over. She didn't want me driving in the storm while eating. Fair enough, I guess. So I found a safe spot on the shoulder and parked. As I finished my food, the rain started coming down even harder. But then, we heard it. A loud bang at the window. At first, I thought it was just the storm, but when I looked out, I saw a figure blocking almost the entire window. My girlfriend screamed, and I nearly had a heart attack. I didn't want to roll down the window. It was pouring like crazy. But over the deafening sound of the rain, I couldn't hear a word the person was saying. So, I cracked the window open, trying to hear. The woman outside looked completely drenched, disheveled, and scared. "Can I get a ride?" she asked. I glanced at my girlfriend. Her face said it all. Why are you letting her in? But I couldn't leave her out there in the storm. I told her to get in the back seat. Once she was inside, I asked where she was heading. She didn't answer. I could feel my girlfriend's glare on me, but I tried to ignore it. I turned to the woman, asking again. This time, she didn't even look at me when I spoke. Instead, she just stared straight ahead with a blank, cold expression. Something about it didn't sit right with me. Before I could speak again, she just shrugged her shoulders. I told my girlfriend I'd drop the woman off in the next town. I said it aloud, loud enough for both of them to hear. But as we got back on the road, the atmosphere shifted. Out of nowhere, an ear-piercing scream pierced the silence. My heart stopped as the woman in the back seat wrapped her arms around my neck, choking me. I slammed on the brakes, fighting to breathe. The car skidded dangerously close to the divider. My girlfriend, in a panic, began slashing at the woman's face with her nails. The woman's scream changed, from crazy, angry shrieking to a distorted wail of pain. I had no choice but to stop the car, pull the woman off me, and throw her out into the rain. She begged over and over, "Please, please." I looked down at her for a second, but I didn't care. I slammed the car door shut, locked it, and put it in drive. My girlfriend was shaking, but we had to get out of there. As I drove off, the woman's screams followed us, her voice twisted and frantic, echoing in the dark. But I didn't stop. We kept driving, and after a while, her screams faded into the distance. We didn't stop again until we got home. My girlfriend immediately called the police, telling them about the unstable woman lurking on the highway. But we didn't want to think about it any longer than we had to. When we finally got back home, I could barely wrap my head around what had just happened. What if I had let her stay longer? What if we hadn't reacted the way we did? That woman. I don't know who she was or what she wanted, but I don't ever want to find out. Story 3. I almost fell into a trap on a dark country road. It was 2010, and I was driving my Ford F-150 from my home in Pennsylvania to visit my family in Georgia. The drive was going to be long, around 14 hours, but I figured I could do it all in one go. I left at 10 a.m., made a quick stop for lunch at a deli, then 4 hours later, took a break at a rest area to eat some turkey sandwiches I had packed. At that point, I was feeling good. But as night fell, I started getting tired. Around 11:30 p.m., I filled up my tank one last time and saw my ETA was around 12:30 a.m. I was close, but exhaustion was setting in. The thing is, I didn't stop for coffee. I should have. But the GPS route I was following suddenly veered off the highway and directed me onto some country roads. Now, my truck's a big beast, and with the light bar I had installed, I could see everything ahead of me. Still, something felt off about this route. But I was so close to my cousin's place that I pushed through. I came to a stop sign and turned left onto a road so quiet it felt like the middle of nowhere. There were no houses, no buildings, just dark trees on either side. The speed limit was 45 miles per hour, but I was driving about 55, maybe 60. I figured, who else would be out here this late, right? Then, out of nowhere, I saw 4 shiny objects in the road. My heart skipped a beat, and I slammed on the brakes. As I got closer, I realized they were traffic drums, those big orange cylinders they put in construction zones. But what really got my attention was what was behind them, a spike trap, like the ones the police used to stop cars. I didn't know what the hell was going on. Was this some kind of police setup, or was it a trap? My mind raced as I cautiously looked around. Then, out of the silence, I heard a scream. Help! It came from the woods on my left. At first, I froze. There was no way I was going into those woods in the middle of nowhere. I yelled out, "What's wrong?" But there was no answer. I stepped closer to the edge of the road, trying to see what was going on, and then I saw something. Out of the corner of my eye, someone was crouched down behind some bushes, barely visible in the shadows. My gut told me to leave, so I didn't waste any time. I casually walked back to my truck, got in, and locked the doors. That's when I saw them, 2 silhouettes by the edge of the woods, slowly moving toward my truck. My heart was racing now. Without thinking, I started the engine, revved it, and drove around the spike trap onto the dirt beside the road. I could feel the tension, the air thick with something I couldn't quite name. I looked into the rearview mirror, and for just a split second, I saw at least 3 silhouettes standing by the traffic drums. They were lit up briefly by my taillights, but in a flash, just like that, they were gone. I kept driving, my hands tight on the wheel, my mind still trying to process what had just happened. That was a night I'll never forget. A night I could have ended up in a completely different situation if I'd made one wrong move. I didn't know who those people were, what they wanted, or if I was lucky. But one thing's for sure, I'm glad I made it out alive. Please, don't forget to like and subscribe. And remember, the darkness is always surrounding us, just waiting for a chance. Thanks for watched. See you next story.